Hello, and welcome to another episode of This Month in Datadog. This month we have a very special episode for you. It's one I've been looking forward to for a while. Today I'm going to sit down with our co-founders, Olivier and Alexis. Thank you both for joining us.
And we're live from New York City.
Exciting, it's exciting. So one issue I had when preparing for this episode was there's far more than I want to ask than we have time for realistically. So let's just get started. And let's start at the beginning. Where did you first meet?
We met, we actually half met, right? We didn't fully meet. This was, I think, 96?
Yeah, let's not reveal our ages too much. But we were in college,
Yes.
not the same year.
Yeah.
And the story is interesting because I was part of the team that ran the campus network, and Alexis was caught hacking into the campus network. So he was court-martialed by the team of students and then sentenced to disconnection from the internet. And I carried out the sentence. So that was the extent of our relationship then.
Yeah, so he knew of me because I had allegedly done something bad. But I was like, I just showed up, in my dorm room. It's like, oh, there's no internet in my computer. What's wrong? And only much later did I realize this was a premeditated act.
It's definitely an interesting first meeting. And the second time you met, I realized it's a little cathartic for me to know that I wasn't the only one in a windowless room early in my career. And the windowless room I was in was also the server room for the dev servers. So it was a trifecta of no natural light, unbelievably cold, and really, really loud. So when was the first time you actually worked together?
We worked together at IBM. So this was, I guess, upstate in Hawthorne. And
It was in research, yes.
Yeah, R&D. It was a windowless office. It was not particularly cold, but we were working on email protocols back then. So that's when we actually formally met and worked together the first time.
And it was not so cool because, I don't know if you remember, we blocked the AC event.
I don't remember that.
So do we have you to blame for POP 3 or?
Close, but not completely. Yes.
Yeah.
More IMAP.
IMAP.
Oh, okay.
Also, yeah.
Got it. So they say third time's a charm, and viewers might be thinking this is where the Datadog story begins, but it's not. But to me, it is where the Datadog origin story really begins. So can you tell us a little bit about wireless generation?
Yes. So wireless generation is I think it was the third startup we worked for, something like that. So we worked for a few startups. We worked together at the let's call it the tail end of the .com boom and the full extent of the .com bust. So we've been through that, which was very interesting in many ways.
It was crazy.
Yes.
Yes.
In ways that are fairly familiar with what we see today. But so we learned a number of things about what it looks like when you start a company. Also, a number of things about what can go wrong and the mistakes you can make especially as you try and build new products to market. And so we spent a few years there. Then we started working together at this education software company called Wireless Generation. And it's a startup that actually worked in the world of education, which is a fantastically interesting space, but also I would call it a brutal space, to build a business and build a company. And that's where the idea of Datadog was born. The backdrop is that Alexis ran the operations team, and I ran the development team, and we built the team pretty much from scratch. And we were very good friends. It was our third or fourth company together already. We hired everybody on our teams. We tried not to hire any jerks, and yet, the teams are fighting. Yeah.
Yeah, and this was one of the early sort of real SaaS, businesses. Because back then, early 2000, you had everybody's trying to use Hotmail and so on, but this was very B2C, and so B2B as SaaS was fairly new. So everybody was trying to figure out how to run it, and we were still operating as the dev team, build the code, write it, it runs on my machine. That means it's okay, throw it over the wall. The ops team is like, okay, we have this, we have to run it in production. Oh, it doesn't work, it crashed, what do we do? And a lot of finger pointing naturally happened. So that, I think, gave us the early inspiration for Datadog.
And so the inspiration was not to build systems management, monitoring, any of that. Like, we didn't come from that world. The inspiration was, let's bring dev and ops together. Let's get the teams to talk to each other. Let's not have the dev team coming to complain to me that The ops people don't know what they're doing, or the ops team complaining to Alexis that the devs are cowboys who ship anything and they don't understand the implications.
And they're when
And they don't
something's
have to
wrong,
be
they
on
get
call
paged.
for it,
Yeah,
importantly. so,
exactly. Yeah, they don't wake up in the middle of the night to fix it. So
Yeah.
So those were the days, I guess.
Yes. So the initial vision was we bring them into one platform, have them speak the same language, and work together. It was also at the time when DevOps was nascent, and I think in retrospect, the thing we didn't fully understand then was that so cloud was going to explode, obviously, and at the heart of the cloud explosion, there would be a movement to bring together Dev and Ops much closer than it used to be, some disintermediation of the work of provisioning and managing hardware and all of that stuff. And that what we were doing, which is bring both Dev and Ops in the same platform, was actually going to be central to cloud adoption. So I would like to say it was all beautiful plan that worked out. Turns out, I think we were also pretty lucky in that we didn't fully understand the implications of what we were doing at the time.
Yeah.
Unless you did. You did?
I wish I could say it wasn't a master plan. Though I looked at the slides we put together at the very beginning of the company, and we haven't veered too much. I mean, we'll build much more than we had planned, but we didn't do some 180 or something like that. So I think the way we thought it could work out ended up not being too far from what happened. So
Interesting. So one lesson you said you learned there was we believe in learning over knowing. Can you expand on that?
So when you start a company, I think there are two ways you can go about it, two extremes. There's one extreme where you say, we need to build everything from scratch, absolutely everything, right? And the other extreme is more, you cargo cult everything. It's like, oh, this big company that's successful, they do it this way, thus we should do it the exact same way. I think we try to find kind of a happy medium, but always going back to what we can see, what the reality is telling us. I think we try to be very pragmatic, but not sufficiently grounded in what we had learned early on in wireless generation, the way you run teams, the way you think about product and stuff like that. So I think with that, we found our way effectively. That's how my interpretation of learning over knowing.
And on the product side, again, if you look back at our influences, so we spent 8 years building and shipping software and SaaS that was used by teachers. And the one thing we realized at the time was that we're not a good proxy for the customer. We have to learn from the customer and the user what actually matters, what we need to build, what's valuable. And we have to be very humble in that conversation. Like our ideas, maybe they're interesting, but really what matters the most is to understand the problem and what we can do and how we can make life better for these customers. So we didn't have that. Like most of the folks who go into building dev tooling or ops tooling or security or all the things we do start from their own problems. We started from an experience that was building for others. So when we started Datadog, the biggest fear was to build something that would not solve a real problem, a really valuable problem. And so we started from day one with that focus on the customer, the user, what their life was, what their problems were, and how we could solve those problems.
So that brings us to Datadog. You mentioned that Datadog was not founded to solve the monitoring problem. What problem were you really trying to solve? What were you building?
We had to basically look for people who we thought had a similar problem. So the way we did that, we looked up a bunch of conferences, and they were pretty low-key conferences, not like the big commercial events. But I remember going in a kind of a semi-abandoned office space in the Valley on a Saturday morning, just finding a bunch of other folks who were also interested in solving the problem of how do you get dev and ops to work together to operate these software stacks, to basically support the entire software lifecycle. And so the way we didn't go there and say, oh, we have this, so we figured out everything, and then do you want to buy it? We went there with the humility to ask, okay, we think we have this problem. Do you have a similar problem? Please tell us more about it. And the interesting discovery I think we made is because we didn't start the conversation with basically a sales pitch, the only question is, tell us about your problem. Then it was people were really extremely eager to share, to explain, okay, this is what I have. I'd love to have something that solve the problem I have, and so on. So it really got us to start the conversation and to try to understand. They weren't customers, but folks that may become customers at one point, what their actual pain points were, not something mediated by some marketing or something, but really. And we discovered that those pain points were not unlike the ones we had. So it gave us some amount of confidence, like, okay, maybe there's something there. We gotta keep digging. But it was really like these small, initially fairly small, fairly deep events. Deep as in like practitioners, not no theory, just battle scars and war stories, as it were.
And Alexis makes it sound like we're really humble people and just looking to learn. Turns out like we were forced to be humble because, as Alexis said, we were not very successful in fundraising. So the vision when we started Datadog was, hey, we'll create this platform. It's going to be a collaborative data platform that is going to bring together many different teams across DevOps. And we pitched it to investors. Nobody wanted to invest in it. We applied to Y Combinator. We presented to the team there. We were rejected from Y Combinator. I have an email from Paul Graham that says a platform is only as valuable as its first product, and we don't have a product. So that was basically all the feedback we were getting was, hey, it is not good enough. The idea is too broad, and you need to focus. So we went back and we talked to everybody we could to try and validate that we were going to build something that was going to be useful. To be honest, the reason why we got things right when we started building the product was that we were so scared of getting it wrong that we spent all our time trying to get validation from the end market and the end user that we were going to build the right thing. And I think if we look at what remains today, the Datadog culture of that time, I think that fear of getting it wrong, that focus on the end market, that early conversation with the user and the customer to make sure that we solve a real problem and not something that we imagine. I think we kept that as a value in the company, and we kept it ingrained in all of our product and engineering teams in terms of how we build, how we think about ourselves and the product.
Yep, and definitely still shows. So especially back then, but even now, founding a company like this in New York City, not the obvious choice. What impact do you think that had, and does it remain today, or was it just the initial difficulties?
I think in a way, it kept us away from a bit of the echo chamber you can find in the Bay Area. So when we started, it was also very hard to raise money in New York City for an infrastructure company. Today it's changed. Today there's many great infrastructure companies that are started in New York City. You can scale a company pretty much anywhere in the world. That was not so much the case 10 or 15 years ago. But I would say culturally, it reinforced our focus on the customer, the end problem, as opposed to the peers and the rest of the ecosystem. It focused us on building a business also that can be sustainable, as opposed to raising capital. And I think it created the right conditions for the company to emerge, I think, at the time. And we keep a lot of that again today. I think today you can build a company anywhere, really. And we see and work with great companies, in New York, in Europe, in the Bay Area, pretty much anywhere.
So when I think of Datadog, if it's the product, I think powerful, but really, really usable. But when I think of the company, I think humble, which you mentioned, and enthusiastic. I'm curious, when both of you think of Datadog, what do you think of?
At least, personally, I think, it's about the people, right? So that's you'll know, well, you can't notice because you're not going to shoot the entire office, but we don't have, we don't have these posters on the wall that says, do this, do that, be that, because it's not, at least, I don't think we think, A, it's particularly important, B, what's companies that put these values in the wall, usually they don't necessarily live up to them. And we think it's the way we behave that's ultimately embodies the value of the company. It is, or of us initially. So we've tried to, I guess, lead by example. If I were to think about the way to characterize it, like we've, by virtue of founding the company, I think we've done most of the jobs that anybody has. I've handled HR, accounting, filled the fridge. You've probably
plunge the toilet. Yeah.
plunge the toilet. Like
I don't do it anymore.
but the reality is, when it's 2, 3, 5 people, you do what you have to do, and there's no notion of I'm so and so I can't stoop down to doing that. So I think that's been true, and because we did not, sort of formalize, to be a Datadog means you're this, and that. That meant that the only way we could show people those values is to behave, according to them. So we have to believe in them deeply, because that's how we're going to behave. And that's what I mean by leading by example. It's like we want to, at least I think what we've been good at is to show other people, this is what good looks like. This is what we think good looks like, and this is what we should shoot for.
In general, if you zoom out and look at the company and the business, the way I think about it is I want to build it the right way for the long term, which means it needs to be a good business. It needs to be a profitable business, because you don't last if you're not a profitable business. It needs to be a business that invests in itself and invests into the future, especially in tech. If you stop investing, if you slow down innovation, you're typically not long, or you're not going to be relevant very long. And so we're trying to do all that. We don't take shortcuts. We don't look for quick wins. We don't look for instant gratifications on social media. Like, that's not our characters at all. That's why you probably don't see us much on the networks. But we really focus on what it is we can build that is high value and is going to be sustainable and is going to get us to be an even more relevant company, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years from now.
So I do want to take this opportunity to thank you both. I don't know if you remember this, Alexis. Hard to believe 9 years ago during my interview, we were talking about Datadog, and you said the best way to proceed in good times and in bad is to be honest and trusted long-term partners to our customers and community. And I can tell you meant it. And it's one of the reasons I joined Datadog. And I think it's as true today as it was then. So thank you for building not just a great product, but a great company. So along that journey, what's been the most surprising?
So same things still matter. Like, everything's moving faster today. I mean, we sure we get to talk about AI at some point, but or AI we get to talk about us.
Yeah.
But the building, like, solving real problems, solving valuable problems, being long-term oriented, being good partners, to customers. These are the things that matter, and that doesn't change. So, I speak very often to, investors or entrepreneurs, and everybody's wondering, what it takes or what changes as you scale and as you need to reach the next level, and do you need to do everything differently? And my answer is usually that no, it's the same. Like, the first principles are the same, the basics are the same, the idea doesn't change. There's more complexity, maybe you get more velocity, or maybe it's harder to get velocity as you scale. But it, in all cases, like, the focus remains the same.
Yeah, I think maybe, but I don't know if it's particular in the tech world, but it's easy to kind of focus on the thing you're building, the technology, the innovation, and so on, and kind of forget that the business is at the heart. You're building something. You're trying to solve somebody else's problem, and in exchange, they'll give you money. That's the basics, right? And that never changes, because sure, the tool, the platform that evolves, that has to evolve, and it has to move pretty fast. But fundamentally, somebody who comes to you as a business, they come to you because they have a problem to solve it. They think that you can solve it for them, and that continues. That keeps going on, because you solve a problem for them, and they come to you with the next problem, and then they again and again and again and again. So I think, yeah, the history of the company has been the repetition of that. It's slightly different, or sometimes very different, but fundamentally, that exchange between two people, effectively, I think is what undergirds the whole thing. So that doesn't change.
So that brings us to the present, and as you mentioned, we're going to talk about AI. So curious how both of you are using AI today. Has it materially changed your workflows?
Mostly, look, I've been working for more than 20 years without AI. And so I have a way of doing everything. I had a way of doing everything that didn't involve, asking a bot or trying to run an agent. So a lot of it has to do with today just trying. Okay, hey, maybe let me try and have the machine do it for me. How does that work? What's happening? What's this new tool? The most complex part is trying over and over again, because things that were not working 3 months ago now might be working perfectly. And so if you stick to your training from the past decades, you internalize that certain approach is working or not working. Actually, that changes very, very fast. So you need to try again. I think the biggest benefit for me today, selfishly, is that I can code again. Before that, just setting the environment, updating everything, was taking forever and was taking more time than I had available. And now with the coding agents, you can paper over the details and have some fun again, which I think is pretty cool.
Yeah. As for me, I've for instance, in a weird way, I'm starting to use many more text files, right? So because that's what
Markdown is cool again.
No, exactly, right? Because that's what agents generally. It's easier for them to work with that than having a bunch of content that's in here and there. And even though it's doable and you can build the code to get all the contents, but there's they're currently well versed to do something. So whether it's summarize, expand, sort of, I've tried, for instance, to give it an outline and have it based on what I had written by hand before, speak, expand and speak in the same tone. It's really good at what we call the deep research piece, where if you kind of know a particular field enough, but you want to really build some thorough analysis, answer a particular question, I think it's really good. It can search a lot of data much faster than you can, and so on. So I think for me, it's been a lot of that, but I agree with Olivier, like experimentation is key. There's just I have no idea what my workflow is going to look like, 6 months from now. I'm just desperately trying to see, okay, what can work, what can work.
I would say though, the one caveat for me is I still haven't reached AI break even. So I've still spent more time every day catching up about AI, learning new stuff, learning what changed, since the day before, than it saves me. But I hope we'll get there at some point.
Yeah, and I have not had this much fun coding in years. It's been great. So as you mentioned, you're talking to a lot of founders right now, which means you're hearing a lot of different ways AI is being used and utilized. Given all of those discussions, what are you most excited about?
I mean, everybody's building so much in so many directions, So, and we can see the explosion of, I would say software in general, but there's going to be services, companies, all sorts of things, that are going to be built on top of that. So the most exciting to me is the explosion of creativity that you can see everywhere, and you see it on the, using the models for, creating images and videos and things like that. Like the barrier to creating is getting a lot lower. You see it on creating code. You see it on experimenting with different ideas for businesses. You see creativity coming from many different parts in companies. Like, now you have, people inside, support or sales teams that are, if they're really motivated and interesting, like create pretty elaborate tools and have, and turn their ideas into reality. And so that's super exciting. I think it has a lot of implications in terms of, what ecosystem you need to build around that, how you make all those innovations sustainable, what's the new normal for the way people work. But I think this redefining of everything and this explosion of new possibilities is super exciting.
So we mentioned agentic coding a few times. Alexis, what impact do you think agentic coding is going to have on engineering organizations like Datadog, but also like our customers?
Yeah. I mean, I think what we've seen internally and externally as well is if you know how to use agents well, meaning you understand what they're good at, what they're not good at, your productivity, as it were, meaning how fast you can write code that runs and that does what you want it to do, is multiplied by orders of magnitude, and so that supports the creativity that Olivier is talking about, right? So, and it can range from, okay, I want to vibe code as a relatively simple internal app to fairly complex systems, or very complex systems. I think the speed, the ability you have to experiment, to build prototypes, to validate and validate ideas, it just didn't exist before. So I don't think we've even started to fully understand the impact it's going to have, at least on the on the coding side. It's the analogy that I keep coming back to is, which I think holds true for on many fronts, is it's like until the 50s, people were controlling computers by writing machine language. It was doable, somewhat tedious. The complexity of the ideas you could express was limited by how much you could, how much space you had in your brain, as it were. And then some folks figured out, well, we got to build tools to express these ideas, but in a language that's closer to the way we think. And the higher level languages were born, compilers were born, and we couldn't foresee really. I don't think, at least they couldn't foresee when they built it, what it will enable down the road. And I think it's not an exact one for one, but I suspect that the magnitude of the impact is going to be similar, if not greater. So this feels like this is only the beginning. And to wit, every week somebody comes up with a new way to an improvement on how to use agents, build harnesses, skills, et cetera, something that didn't exist 3 months ago, and that truly changes the game. So we're in a sense, I think globally, the industry is catching up to what agents can do in terms of building software, and behind building software is the problem you solve. It's crazy right now. It's crazy.
Yeah. So moving on to research a little bit, the work that our research team is doing on Toto is super, super interesting. Can you tell us more?
Yeah, so for those who are not familiar, Toto is our sort of first party time series model, so foundational model. And a few things that I think set it apart is, one, the corpus of data it's trained on is vastly superior to what has been available, publicly. And I think it's the first model, the first step we see towards data building more and more of its own foundational models, and specifically designed to solve and to answer questions that have to do with the world of software. So we're not talking about a general purpose, something that can speak 250 languages and analyze medical imagery and all that stuff that the frontier labs are doing really well. I think we're talking about something much more specific to the world of software, the rules of the road, the way software is built, and so on. And so when we marry telemetry and these models, our goal is to be able to have very powerful predictive power or very powerful predictions. And so Toto is the first step. We have many more. We're working on many more.
And to zoom out a bit, Toto was open source. The first version of it that we released. It's on Hugging Face, been downloaded millions of times. We trained it largely on observability data, but it also, when it came out, it was state of the art on any kind of time series and all the time series benchmark, so you could use it for weather forecasting and other things, for example. And the reason it's so good is, so part of it is the power of deep learning, which I think we've all learned scales extremely well. But also the incredible data set we have, so we, as a platform, we ingest several billions of records a second. And we have a really, really good idea of which ones of those time series are high quality or interesting or impactful, because we know which one of these time series are looked at by our customers, which ones are being used to wake people up at night, and those tend to be high quality. And so we could actually train models using really, really high, really, really powerful evaluations, basically, for what was valuable or not. And by the way, the open source version of Toto is trained purely on our own internal data, so we don't use any customer data for that. It's only data that Datadog submits to Datadog and that we can use for it. We're busy scaling that up right now, so we're scaling it up to a lot more data. We're scaling it up also to include not just metric data, but also logs and traces and all of the various other pieces of data we gather inside of the platform. And the end goal here really is to build a self-driving system for the infrastructure, so we can have an end-to-end model that take telemetry in and output, what needs to change in the infrastructure, basically to prevent from having issues and auto-fix it. And I think 5 years ago it was science fiction, but 5 years ago we were barely seeing the first self-driving cars and all of that. I think today it's pretty clear that that's achievable, and we're hard at work on that.
And that's what customers want too, right? They want their system to work, and that's ultimately the goal. So we think that we can see how to get from here to there. It's not going to happen overnight, but and the path to that is building more and more models that are really tuned to the world of software.
That's a great segue to our final question, which is things are moving very rapidly, so it's impossible to predict too far out. But let's say a year from now, where do you think this goes?
What I'd love to be able to say a year from now is that sort of self-driving for software, we'd be able to demonstrate it, end to end, not for all the cases, but we could show that, yes, look, it is actually possible, and here's a proof.
Yeah, and the way I would frame it is, throughout the life of the company, we've seen that the world of software writing and running has become way more productive. And as developers become more productive, they create more complexity. By that I mean people write more than they can understand, and so because they do it faster and they spend less time on it. And so we've seen this explosion of complexity over time. The table stakes for what we've been doing as a company has been, okay, we need to keep up with complexity. So as complexity increases, we bring the humans up, so we don't get too far behind, and we can sort of keep up with all of the stuff we've created. I think the complexity is going to explode even faster, and so we better keep up. That's one thing. But two, as we were saying with the end-to-end models, we finally have a chance to not only keep up, but maybe also start catching up with the complexity a little bit, and do a lot more without involving the humans, so that we can all focus on building, instead of waking up in the middle of the night and fixing things. And so I think that's something to look forward to. And there's quite a bit more that needs to be built, but I think we can get there.
Yeah.
Amazing. So Olivier, Alexis, thanks again for joining. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And that wraps up another episode of This Month in Datadog. We'll see you next month.